Yesterday we had this beautiful lecture about the metaphysical problems, as it were, of homecoming, and I will concentrate a little bit on the physical side today, which I think is in a way metaphysical as well, because of course metaphysics are built into the physical world. And I will, as has been said, concentrate on the Rassco, which I've worked on for the past few years together with my colleague Ines Sonder at Moses Mendelssohn Center at Potsdam. So let me first of all give you some very short details about Rassco. Many of you, or at least those born in Israel, will know Rassco probably, you know, as a kind of builder of ugly shikunim. There's like Rassco asbestos somewhere, I think in Haifa Bay. But Rassco really was a company that started much earlier. It started, in fact, in 1933, 1934, as part of the so-called Ha'avara agreements, and was explicitly founded for the settlement of German Jews in Palestine, Eretz Israel. And I think even that Siegfried Moses, who was, I think, belonged to the founders of the Leo Baeck Institute, was very much involved in the process. So it really ties in very much with the history of German Jews. Interestingly, you know, during our work, we found that of course in Germany no one really knows about it anyway, but also in Israel many people did not know, you know, that how really did the Jews coming from Germany settle here? Well, how did it really work, you know? And this is so my talk is a little bit not so much about the intellectuals, Martin Buber, you know, everyone who kind of had the nice philosophical explanation for what happened, but it's a little bit focused and centered on the ordinary people who just had to go through this whole process of transfer, which I think in the word already denominates that this was a breaking point, really. It was a deconstruction of lives and a reconstruction in another place. And so I think there's a certain shift of perspective here, which we encountered also in our work, because although we started with this as a sort of, or that was our starting point, let's say our matrix of our research agenda, we started with an institutional study as such. We realized, of course, that this has to do with the individual, with the subject in history in the end, and it was very much part of our work, you know, apart from archival work, to go to the places where the people live and talk to them, and that experience was oftentimes very touching. So I'll just show you here to give you some general idea about Rassco, what they did. I mean, they were at first a very small company, and within transfer, actually, they made 0.5% of transfer turnover, right? But nevertheless, I mean, they were able to found a good deal of settlements until 1939, and then quickly after 1945, they built for other groups, of course not German Jews anymore as such, but a similar clientele, let's say. So these are some of the settlements, and here I show you some of these really iconic images. I think Kvarshmayahu, which was the first settlement. Many of it, I mean, it's today, of course, it's changed. You won't recognize it anymore, really. Here, I really like this image. It's by Rudi Weissenstein, and they built the menorah from water pipes. Stevarburg, Shavetzion, which was a little bit of an exception within the Rassco settlement, because it was, you see, it's a Homan Gdal settlement. It was also collective settlement. The other were not a collective settlement. The other were so-called middle-class settlement, which was the settlement for the German Jews. It was kind of a new form of settlement they extra devised, let's say, within the framework of Ha'avara transfer, to make it possible that those German Jews coming as capitalists to the country, as it were, because they were capitalists, because they disposed of a certain amount of money, which would have been £1,000. That would have been enough for a capitalist certificate to enter the country. So those capitalists were the ones who then would work in this context as farmers, basically. Here we have Bet Yitzchak. This was sort of the last of the fully grown middle-class settlements that Rassco realized before the outbreak of a Second World War. And of course, afterwards, during statehood, they much expanded their activity. So this, again, is to show you what I told you before of meeting these people, which has been a very special experience indeed, because it transcends, of course, the institutional work, which is, like the objective level of historicity. And this was, you meet the people. This was Lilo Reis, born Littin. She was among the first settlers of Stevarburg. She was 105 years at the time we interviewed her, and she was very smart, very bright, and it was, what was especially touching. We recorded the interview, of course, that was the German. I mean, because we conversed in German. It was a very, very, very good German. It was a very, very polished German. It was much better than what most people speak nowadays in German. And I realized that this, if we speak about home, that the German language, I think, was definitely a part of that, maybe in the beginning, and something that would have been quickly lost, probably, but it was a sort of a thing that I think people in the beginning at least kept, I mean, they had their small circles in the beginning in the villages with where they would write poems, because that was a very German thing to do, and so on. Here we have another family Hase of Quarschmayau. Here you see where they come from. This is, below on the left side, that could be any German family with this kind of Matrosenanzüge, very Wilhelmian, what you would look like. And then already the passage is probably Loi Triestino, because most of the people came over via Trieste. And then, wow, it's a new reality in Palestine. This would be like, one standard Rassco house. And there would be policing, of course. That would be one of the jobs, one of the obvious changes in life. And you would be a dairy farmer. This is, I think, the son Fritz. And I think he was killed quite early. That was during the either during the Arab uprising in 1936 or a little later, because it was very common in the beginning that the Arab surrounding population would try to steal the cows. Also, this again, I found it very, very interesting. This was one of the objects that the family kept. It was a toolbox, and they kept it like something very valuable. They even restored it. I liked it very much because the toolbox for me stands, in a way for proficiency and competence, and it's something that actually symbolizes a bit, the kind of new things you have to learn, you have to acquire when you arrive in the country. You start as being an intellectual, or be a lawyer or whatever, coming from Germany, and then you have to be, or you are a craftsman or a farmer. Yeah. So I will not really talk much about transfer here, or about the technicalities. I would just say very, very shortly that indeed I believe that it's kind of built into the houses, really, and it kind of permeates the whole construction, the whole institutional construction of the Rassco. It permeates down to the level of housing itself. It determined like the sizes of the houses, for example, a bit at least. And I think that like any German settler, coming in the time, would have been faced with ha'avara in a way or another, and that transfer is a sort of a feeling of life, maybe, or an experience of life. It's you're in transfer, and in financial terms, I mean, transfer was like, to make it very easy, maybe was like the conversion of Judenhass into a currency that could be very valuable in Palestine, because the idea was basically that German Jews would not take any money with them, not take any foreign reserve, because Germany was very low in foreign reserve. So this will hurt the German economy if they will take it. So they cannot leave the country, really. Okay, but they can leave if they just take goods. So they will take, let's say, a house, which they will, of course, not take with them physically, but it will be translated via various channels, so and so. There will be the Havara company here in Tel Aviv, and it's in Allenby Road, and there will be the Paltroy in Berlin, and there will be accounts in the Wassermann Bank and in the Warburg Bank, and then there's the Anglo-Palestine Bank, and way by way, you know, they will kind of transform this kind of pooled, liquidated German Jewish money and transfer it to Palestine, and people like capitalists who have enough money can pay in, and they will have, in the end, a house in Palestine for £1,000. So that was part of the difficulty, to sort of remain within these £1,000 and to give people like, you know, a settler house for this £1,000. Because in practice, of course, settlers did not receive this money in any way, but the money was converted to shares mostly. Like Rassco was a shareholding company, and shareholders would preferentially get a house, but not necessarily. So it was a very complex thing. And also, I mean, in a way, you know, transfer, of course, did influence the mode of living, because it was not that people individually decided, we will do this and that, we will move to Palestine. No, before they came to Palestine, they would sign the settlement contract and so on. And Rassco then, there were other companies of that kind, you know, like Naharia Limited was also like a transfer company, Hanotea, which built Netanya for a great part, Nir, just to name a few. Okay, so they would, of course, determine to a great part where the settlements would be, and they would determine also about the economy of these settlements, because like I said, you know, we have the problem, we have academics here, really. So it's they're not used to labor in the field, so they need hachshara and all that, and it needs to be, I mean, the farming they do, they have to do needs to be adapted to their needs. I mean, in the beginning, people said anyway that these are old people, they will not be able to cope, you know, with farming and so on, and it was considered to be an experiment that cannot work. But okay, one part of it was that they said that it has to be intensive gardening, intensive farming, vegetable growing. We have dairy and we have poultry farming, something which had hitherto not been common in Palestine. And of course, this had to do, I mean, with the development of the markets as well, because you get the people come in, you know, and they demand milk. So milk was like a new product, and it was very common, like in Naharia, for example, but also in Rassco settlements, to have 1 cow or 2 cows and to have poultry, because it was thought to be a good thing for immigrants. And here, again, you see, we had it like minimal housing. Here we have a modern variant of minimal housing. Again, this is tied to of course, it's tied to a modernist idea of architecture, which was en vogue at the time. It has to do with rationalization and so on. And we have the same discourse in Germany with Bruno Taut, and it's kind of a standardization issue. And here again, it's in a way also influenced by Havara, because, of course, the building materials for a great part were bought in Germany. So you need to standardize houses in a certain way. You have a sort of building catalog, and people can pick their house in Germany. And they have type A, type B, type AK. That here would be type AK. They have type AK double. And these houses will be, you know, reproduced and appear more or less in all the settlements in the same fashion. Then what I just said, you have this kind of Umschichtung. Here, this is children actually in Stevalburg. And here again you have, this is Kvarshmayahu again, the most typical, let's say, middle-class settlement, and you have a meshek, which is, again, suited to middle-class farming and cows and poultry. This, again, is an image which I find very interesting in terms of the generational gap, maybe, you know, the generation. I mean, of course, in the settlements, life, like we often heard, life was incredibly hard in the beginning. Farming never paid off. You know, people were almost always on the point of bankruptcy. It just got better in 1952 when people, you know, finally received some shilumim payments from Germany. But then, of course, you have the younger generation coming through, and that's something that people reflected in the settlements as well. So briefly, I just want to say, I think that this is a very, that these settlements, not only those settlements, but generally, let's say, the transfer and translation of goods to become some sort of housing, I think is a relevant topic, and it's an important physical heritage that should in some way be acknowledged, and I hope to pursue it actually furthermore in a new project that I have just submitted for DFG, which should be like an atlas, which is a digital resource, and where you can actually present all the kind of material which there is, because there is rich material in the settlements alone, you know, all the kind of family albums, and it would be a great idea, you know, to have this kind of almost like a virtual museum, maybe. It is maybe a bit far-fetched, but nevertheless, to give, in a way, a face to the ordinary people who otherwise, you know, who lived in the periphery, who did not live in Jerusalem or in Rehavia or somewhere, but who lived in those areas and had to make a living. And it's basically, I'm not sure if it's a success story, but it's a story of survival, and I find it very touching. Thank you very much.